Welcome to the West Wing Week, your guide to everything that's happening at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue and beyond. This week, the president wrapped up an historic trip to the Middle East with stops in Israel, the West Bank, and Jordan, and then returned home for a naturalization ceremony, visits with the LA Galaxy and Kings, African leaders, young ambassadors, and Spanish-language television. He wrapped up the week by pressing for common-sense action to protect children from gun violence. It's March 22nd to March 28th, or
That's where peace begins, not just in the plans of leaders, but in the hearts of people.
On Friday, the president was halfway through a 4-day trip to Israel, the West Bank, and Jordan, and the first foreign trip of his second term. West Wing Week caught up with Deputy National Security Advisor Ben Rhodes to fill us in on the trip so far for the latest installment of From the Roads.
Really extraordinary couple of days here visiting in Israel and in the West Bank. He got here on Wednesday and had a very moving arrival ceremony, after which he went and viewed an Iron Dome battery. After that, we went to a bilat with President Perez. There was a ceremonial tree planting to get at the deep roots between our two peoples. Then the president had a very long series of discussions with Prime Minister Netanyahu. They went through the subjects of Israeli-Palestinian peace, Israel's security, our shared efforts to prevent Iran from getting a nuclear weapon, and the uncertain situation in the region. Yesterday we had a fascinating day. It began with the president going to the Israel Museum and seeing the Dead Sea Scrolls, which speaks to the very ancient Jewish connection to this part of the world. After the visit to the Israel Museum, the president traveled to the West Bank. While he's in Ramallah, he met with President Abbas. They had a good discussion, focused principally on how to get the peace process started and bring about the two-state solution that we all seek. After that, he gave a speech at the Jerusalem Convention Center to the Israeli people, particularly young people. We were really inspired by the overwhelmingly positive response. Again, the president was able to speak to the deep connections between our two countries, the deep respect we have for Israel, and our shared commitment to pursuing peace here in the Middle East. Then last night, the president was honored at a dinner by Shimon Peres, who awarded him the highest medal distinction that the Israeli government has.
I'll take it from here, Ben. Thanks. Friday saw wreath laying at Herzl and Rabin's grave sites, and then at the Hall of Remembrance at Yad Vashem, Israel's official memorial to the Jewish victims of the Holocaust.
We could come here 1,000 times, and each time our hearts would break.
Then the president crossed back into the West Bank, this time to the Palestinian city of Bethlehem, where he visited the Church of the Nativity. And then it was on to his last stop on this trip, to the Hashemite kingdom of Jordan, where King Abdullah II honored the president's arrival with a ceremony fit for a king, replete with pomp, circumstance, fife, drum, swords, and camels. The two leaders then adjourned for a bilateral meeting and a joint press conference, ending the third and busiest of the president's days on the road. On Saturday, the president made his way to the ancient city of Petra, a UNESCO World Heritage Site, and the last stop on his tour of the Middle East, where he was given a wonder-filled tour through the winding system of rock-cut architecture, established possibly as early as 312 BC as the capital city of the Nabatean people.
But people weren't living in this area.
No, they were living in our part.
So they would be coming here for ceremonial activities,
Yeah, absolutely.
group activities,
Absolutely.
religious
And that's the reason for why it is in the top of the mountain, because it's
Closer
closer.
to the gut.
Absolutely.
Closer to the guts.
So,
At the end, he carved out a little time to do some souvenir shopping, a must for any self-respecting dad.
Isn't that neat?
Wow,
That's beautiful.
gorgeous.
And it's Malia and Sasha.
yeah, lovely names.
Are we going to put a cap on top of this once we get it?
Yeah.
The process like this.
I don't want to have to carry it all the way back to Washington.
Then it was time to leave the desert kingdom and embark on the nearly 6,000-mile trip back to Washington, where the president would arrive 7 time zones earlier and somehow still on Saturday. On Monday, the president began his week at home by hosting a naturalization ceremony in the East Room to welcome 28 active duty service members and civilians to American citizenship and call for reforms that will help harness the talent and ingenuity of all those who want to work hard and find a place in America.
What makes somebody American isn't just their bloodlines. It's not just an accident of birth. It's a fidelity to our founding principles, a faith in the idea that anyone, anywhere, can write the next great chapter in this American story.
On Tuesday, the president congratulated 2 Los Angeles teams, the Kings and the Galaxy, on their MLS and NHL championship victories.
I hear you guys beat my Blackhawks yesterday.
Later, the president met with the 11 Cesar Chavez Champions of Change, who embody the spirit of Chavez's legacy and commit themselves to working in their communities to advocate for and organize around comprehensive immigration reform.
If and when we get legislation passed.
Then he met with the March of Dimes ambassador,
She's a little shy.
That's okay. I'm shy sometimes too.
a second grader named Nina, and her family. Wednesday marked the annual tradition of the presidential signing of the ERP, the Economic Report of the President. The president took some time to thank the entire staff of the Council of Economic Advisors who had written the report. Then the president sat down to talk with Lourdes Maluza of Univision and Lori Montenegro of Telemundo on some of the issues of the day, including the need for comprehensive immigration reform. At the end of the day, the president hosted the swearing-in ceremony of Julia Pearson as the director of the United States Secret Service. On Thursday, the president stood with mothers, law enforcement officials, and victims of gun violence to urge Congress to take action on common-sense measures to protect children from gun violence.
I read an article in the news just the other day wondering, has Washington missed its opportunity because as time goes on after Newtown, somehow people start moving on and forgetting. Let me tell you, the people here, they don't forget. Shame on us if we've forgotten. I haven't forgotten those kids. Shame on us if we've forgotten.
Then, the president congratulated the men and women who won the 2012 Kavli Prize. They were honored for their pioneering contributions in the fields of astrophysics, nanoscience, and neuroscience.
The only reason that in the past it hasn't been this number is because our daughters were discouraged.
Yeah, we have to do something about that.
And we're starting to.
The president then met with a group of African leaders representing Sierra Leone, Senegal, Malawi, and Cape Verde. To find out more information on any of these topics or to see complete videos of these events, whether they're about international politics or domestic politics or tooth fairy politics, go to whitehouse.gov. And thanks again for checking out your West Wing Week.
You know, I only see one problem though, and that is, Nina, it looks like somebody stole your teeth. It was it the tooth fairy who took them? So is she going to give him some? Is she going to give Nina some teeth back? Is that how it works? She going to get her teeth back? Are you sure?
Yeah.
Okay. Have you lost any teeth yet?
No.
No? Tooth fairy hasn't come for your teeth? Okay.